Well, the first thing to say is introduce these gents. For those, I mean, I know a lot of you know them already, but maybe you could just show that your appreciation for them individually. On the end, Jarrod Brereton playing saxophone for you. Michael McNab playing drums. Fabian Acuna playing trumpet. And Matt Hoyne playing guitar. So, for me, the thing that is very affecting right away for this group is firstly the sound of these instruments together. I think it's a really unique sonic world that they create, despite the fact that the combination is unusual, but also that it's very much a product of these guys' personalities, I think, also. So I'd like to get into that a little bit later, but first, the second thing that really gets to me is the quality and the maturity of the compositions and the way the compositions engender a world that we all are able to get into. So maybe we could begin by asking about how you generate these compositions and whether or not you apply a certain philosophy or a kind of general approach to how you bring music to this ensemble. Matt, maybe you could start.
I guess we just sort of, each of us composed music for it. It's sort of been a bit heavy on Jarrod and Fabian today. They wrote most of it. But yeah, normally it's sort of a pretty equal amount of compositions. And yeah, we don't sort of do it together. It's something that we all sort of bring in a piece and then sort of work on it. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of the main process. I think, you know, I mean, we try and sort of help each other out, but yeah, the majority of it comes from the individual more so than the group. Yeah.
Right, and of course the way that the compositions invite the improvisation sections is also something that's interesting, particularly texturally, the way you're able to blur those lines between what is very specifically composed, but is also improvised. Jarrod, do you have specific ideas of how the improvisation is going to go when you bring music into this ensemble, or is it something that is developed by playing?
It's always something that I start out with. For me, anyway, I start out with a very clear idea of what I want, but then it changes completely when I bring it to this group, just I guess because of the nature of it, and it becomes a lot more organic. But yeah, I guess I'm really, really drawn to compose like really strong compositions that are really gestural, I suppose. And
maybe you could unpack that phrase gestural for.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I've always got trying to have an idea of where, I guess it's sort of like direction, like where the music's going, where it's sitting for a while, or where it's where it's taking the listener. And I guess I really try and convey that strongly to the guys when I bring charts into the group. And then in terms of the improvisation sections, they're sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. It's very much just I bring it into the band and they just make something really beautiful of it.
I reckon this brings up a really interesting point for the way that improvising ensembles operate today, in contrast to perhaps how they operated in generations past, in that to my ears, you seem to take a lot of care in bringing a world to the tunes. So making sure that the improvisations operate within whatever the guidelines are of the composition.
Yeah, we definitely have parameters.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Michael?
Yeah, so basically it's just trial and error. Like someone will write a tune and it'll have a really specific character that they're trying to convey, and you know it'll usually make itself evident just through playing it. Oh, should I speak into the mic?
Sorry. This is all going to the video, so it'd be great for. Plus, you can work on your MC chops by.
Yeah. So what was I saying? The each composition has its own specific mood or character that we're trying to convey, and it'll be a matter of trial and error of trying out different things within the composition. And usually we end up just after trying out different things and just asking questions like, what happens if we do this? What happens if we try and do this? Like, what happens is we end up, setting parameters, like just because, as in, you know, parameters as in there's a specific character that you're trying to play to for each piece. So there are certain things that suit that, and there are certain things that aren't, that you could play. Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say as well is I think this band is as like equally a compositional endeavour as much as an improvisational endeavour. Like with the songs or the compositions or whatever you want to call them, I think it's a bit of a thing between us that when we bring in tunes, we're trying to ask questions, like just ask questions about composition. What happens if, you know, what happens if I just play this sound, just this texture, and Matt just does this, while these two people, the horns, gradually, like, you know, do a crescendo or, you know, get louder, or we're just trying to play with compositional elements in weird ways, just asking questions, basically.
Yeah, that introduces another idea which I think is particularly characteristic of this group, which is obviously we are one instrument short of a kind of classic jazz quintet. The bass, which is missing, obviously for me doesn't have, despite my obvious bias, doesn't have a great deal of impact on the palette of the ensemble. Like I feel as though the terms are really so well defined by the way that you do conduct yourselves within the ensemble that there's no sense of anything being missing. But I guess in a way it must somehow dictate the decisions you make from a rhythm section point of view, and also the way that you share the kind of role playing elements of the music. That idea of role playing is something that's familiar to jazz musicians because the ensemble concept of jazz was generated by instruments performing specific roles. Obviously, the drums were designated a certain kind of timekeeper role. The bass, which is missing here, is designated a role of sort of grounding the harmonic information. You have a chordal instrument for that middle thing, and then you have the horns providing that kind of foreground melody, you know, in really simple terms. But you guys seem to dismantle all of that stuff really effectively. Fabian, how does this affect you as a frontline instrument when you have to perform like maybe specifically textural roles or roles that aren't necessarily about, you know, being the soloist on top of a rhythm section?
It's definitely sort of made me decide how to like go about improvising as well as composing. Like, I'm just going to talk about my last composition, Kurtai, because like I brought that in, and that was a hard tune to sort of get working together because it was originally written for like a bigger ensemble but I thought it would work really well with this ensemble. And we like tried to play it through first, and it was missing like a lot of stuff I originally had in mind for that piece. So we had to sort of work at different approaches we could take to make the piece work. And it comes like this instrumentation, you're left out in the open a lot, I think. Like with you know, your sort of only basis and harmony being Matt, and like we could say like our timekeeper is Michael, but he's really exploring different ways you could like texturally rather than like really nailing the time. So it gives you a lot of independence with soloing, where you have to like, you sort of don't think of it as a way of like, I'm going to outline this. It's more like I have to have it in my head already before I can actually like explore the different possible ways I can improvise.
Right, which heightens the onus of responsibility on each of you as ensemble members.
Yeah. Because
you're all simultaneously responsible for the time, for the textual decisions. I mean, and Matt, a lot of it does come down to you in terms of supporting or making explicit some of the harmonic choices, register choices.
I think that's sort of part of it. Sometimes I might have to sort of, forego kind of hipness or something cool just to keep it really strong and you know, so which is good though. I think, you know, it's really important because I mean, even though you were talking about roles in a sort of a traditional setting, and I think we all have sort of a great respect for the tradition and understand it and really explored it, but I think we have sort of created our own roles, and that's sort of important. You know, that is sort of specific for this group. And I mean, yeah, the thing of sort of traditional jazz, you know, I mean, who says a horn player can't comp, and who says, you know, guitarist can't do, you know, it's that sort of thing. We're trying to take that as sort of a guide, but then also build upon it and sort of tailor it to fit our own sort of thing. Yeah.
Are there any models for this type of thing that you guys reference? Are there any ensembles or influences that you look to kind of help you get some ideas of how to treat an instrumentation like this?
Good question. I think there's definitely an underrepresentation of groups sort of without a bass player. Not saying,
because bass players are just
not saying anything,
indispensable,
you know.
and everything, right?
But I mean, I think there's maybe 5 or 6 that I can sort of think of, and I mean, the sort of one of the earliest ones would sort of be, there's a group with Nat King Cole and Buddy Rich and Lester Young, and no bass player, which was sort of quite bizarre for that time. But then I think there's sort of, in the American thing, there's kind of Bill Frisell, Joe Lovano, and Paul Ocean. That's been a sort of, for me especially, that's been a big thing. But I mean, I think really it comes down to the city that we live in. I think you can do anything here, I think, which is great, which is really fantastic. But there are groups sort of, definitely the Andrea Keller Quartet has been a big thing for a lot of us. I know a lot of us really took a lot from them, and Palava, they're sort of more the textural sort of side of things, and anything with sort of Steve Magnuson and you know, without a bass player. Yeah, so there are groups definitely in this city where it's quite a big thing.
Which I think is an interesting thing too about like introducing that famous trio of Nat King Cole, Lester Young, Buddy Rich. That was definitely a group that was replacing the bass player with a certain concept, replacing a bass player with a left hand with kind of a constant 4 on the floor bass drum thing. But as the other groups you've mentioned make no attempt to replace the bass player, they just treat it as a new palette. And I think, to my ears, that's what you guys do as well, which is quite a refreshing thing, to not try and replace what a bass player would be doing.
Could I say a little bit on that? Yeah, just on that, when we put the group together, we didn't do it with the intention of making a bassless quartet. It was more that the 4 of us were mates, we got along really well, and we sort of felt that our personalities would go together. It would mash in a good way musically. So we were never setting out to make the whole fact that there wasn't a bass player, you know, a thing. It was just so, like, I've never really thought of it as an issue for us. We've never even had a conversation about like, oh, what are we going to do here because there's no bass? Just because it was originally all more about musical personalities than, you know, trying to put together particular instrumentations.
Well, I mean, that's interesting too, because like Matt mentioned, it's a product of being in Melbourne, a product of all of you guys meeting at the VCA. And I think that's something that's common to all of the Riverside Live winners for this particular program, is that the instrumentation has followed the personalities rather than the other way around, which I think is something that speaks about a really strong community that you guys are a part of. So if we bring that back to this discussion of jazz, the tradition that Matt mentioned before, and how that relates to you being in this community here in Australia, being young musicians, how does the tradition of jazz enter your process, if at all?
That's a really good question. I don't know. For me personally, I hadn't really checked out much jazz before I came to VCA, and I think it's definitely the institution that's keeping jazz alive, rather than like, you know, you know, like a massive, massive movement, which is what it was, you know, in the 50s. I think institutions like the VCA and Monash and stuff, they're sort of teaching the tradition. And for me personally, jazz is just another style of music for me to listen to and enjoy. There are all different kinds of styles of music and idioms that feature improvisation that influence me just as much as the jazz tradition does. And I think that there's also, like, even though the jazz scene in Melbourne is, I guess it's smaller than somewhere like, say, New York, the jazz scene here is really, really diverse and, like, really thriving. Like, there's just so many amazing musicians who are doing something truly unique to them. And yeah, I don't know exactly why that is, but it's definitely inspiring. Yeah.
Maybe we could invite any questions from you guys, if you have anything that you'd like to ask these gentlemen. Well, while these folks are, you know, mustering the courage, what are your goals for this group? I mean, obviously you've developed a really strong a strong repertoire already. You definitely have a sound already. What are the kind of things that you'd like to achieve with the group? What are some of the things that you'd like to do?
I think the main thing about this group is like what Jarrod said. So like about the personality, about all of us making music together. So I think the main goal in this group is to like just play what we really enjoy. And like we all have really different preferred styles that all sort of mix together as one. Like electronic music, for example, like contemporary electronic music has a big influence on me and Michael and Jarrod and Matt, maybe? I don't know. But it's really to like write what we really enjoy, like about each type of music that we listen to all the time, like, and not thinking like about, you know, play the head and then solo and then head again. It's like really sort of building on like what we really enjoy. And I think because we're all friends, we can really feel comfortable about like bringing in this music and seeing what we can do. And even if we have like a very preferred style and way of what we want our composition to be, yeah, like all of our personalities put together can really change the song into what we like as a band.
Well, look, I mean, I can tell you on behalf of all of us, we all really like it too. So if no one has any questions, I think I might just say thank you very much to the Catharticate, to these gentlemen, for being a part of this program, and obviously the incredible music that they've presented today. We're all very grateful for. So please, once again, thank Catharticate. So while we're on thank yous, I'd like to extend my thanks and for this Talking Music Prize to Lucy and to Emma and everyone here at the Arts Centre who's put together an incredible crew and an incredible production for these young musicians to bring their music to. We have 2 more concerts here next 2 Thursdays. Next week is Laura Nichols, really great band, and finally the amazing Hannah Cameron is going to be on the last week. So please come down and tell everyone you know about what's happening here, and look forward to clicking on the YouTube clips of these guys as they present their EPKs. So once again, to the Arts Centre, to Catharticate, thank you very much.
And thank you, Chris Hale.